Hello, welcome to Survive the Jive. What would you do if you found a dead animal under your house? A friend of mine, while renovating his house, encountered an old burlap sack, and when he looked inside, it contained the petrified body of a dead cat. He told me about this, knowing that I know all about this sort of folky practices, and I informed him that this is quite a common occurrence in Britain, where these dead cats or sometimes horse skulls or cows' heads or horse heads are placed under the house, or cats' bodies in the walls or cavities in the walls. And these are apotropaic, which means they are intended to ward off evil. They protect the house. What I didn't know is how widespread this custom is and how ancient it is. Today I'm going to give you some examples of this bizarre custom of burying sacrificial animals under the house, some from modern times, but many going back all the way to pagan times and right into the furthest depths of prehistory to the Indo-Europeans. But first, we're going to look at the folklore concerning this practice, mainly from Ireland and Britain and Scandinavia, and how even that spread to America. So before you start digging up your foundations to check if there's a dead horse there, watch this video. The modern folklore concerning this practice of so-called building deposits or burying a sacrificial animal or person under the foundations of the house is today mostly associated with the folklore of Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia, but also Lithuania, Latvia, and Germany, and also it's found in America to a lesser extent, or was until recently. But when we're looking at the ancient examples in archaeology, then it seems that it begins in the Bronze Age. It didn't happen in the Stone Age. And the Bronze Age is a period when Europe was changing quite a lot, and an introduction of new customs associated with the Indo-Europeans were being introduced at different parts of the continent. The custom becomes much more common in the Iron Age. During the Iron Age, there seems to have been a trend towards depositing only specific parts of the animal, whereas earlier there'd been the entire animal. And that could be usually the skull of a horse and its legs, or perhaps also the tail. In the Iron Age, you often find that these animal deposits are underneath the post holes, which hold up the walls of the house, the edges. Whereas modern examples can be more placed on cornerstones of a house or under thresholds of a door. In both cases, there seems to be a concern with the border of the property, securing the edges and the borders of the property, and strengthening its spiritual defenses. Modern examples and the explanations that people give in folk customs for why they're doing this today would lead us to apply those same explanations to the ancient examples as well. And that explanation is usually that there's some kind of protection from witchcraft. Like the horse will protect you from witchcraft. But the modern reasons can also include good luck or appeasement of certain entities that live on the land or in the house that need to be placated in order to protect the people living in the house from that entity. This custom is actually very common across Britain and Ireland, all the British Isles. Sometimes there are actually more than one skull, but loads of skulls deposited together. For example, there are 30 to 40 horse skulls regularly arranged under the floor of an old house in Suffolk, and that's in England. And this case, when it was found, is usually argued to be a form of acoustics benefits, an acoustic deposit. So this is a variant of this practice, where for some reason people believed in Britain and Ireland that burying lots of horse skulls under the house will make the acoustics better. So obviously that not usually just a house, that usually only happens in a communal building like a hotel or something. Another example of this is in Wales, in a house that was rebuilt in 1870. They found 40 horse heads taken from under the floor of what had originally been a hotel. So therefore, it's possible that this was an acoustic deposit. I think that this acoustic explanation is only applicable in some cases, and it's very much it's only in cases when there's many skulls and it's in a communal building like a dance hall or a hotel. In the British Isles, in folklore, the horse is often associated with good luck, and there's a belief that horses can bring luck to the house. And that's also manifested in the custom of leaving horseshoes on your house, which also has a separate explanation associated with iron being a ward against evil in many cultures. The Brits brought this custom to the United States when they migrated there. There was a horse skull found under a house in South Deerfield in Massachusetts, and in its eye socket was a bit of paper with the names of the family of Colonel David Mason Bryant, who moved into that home in 1848. And Bryant was from an English family, and that shows that in the 19th century, English people were bringing this custom into America. Today's video is sponsored by Atlas VPN, with the best VPN deal available right now. Just $1.83 a month, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. A VPN allows you to unlock restricted content worldwide on streaming services like Netflix and Amazon. It also lets you perform searches on the internet in private. Atlas VPN can even block ads and malware and notifies you when someone tries to steal your data. You can use it to save money by getting access to regionally specific deals online, like when you buy flights, for example. And a single subscription provides protection for an unlimited number of devices. Grab the big deal, because now Atlas VPN Premium is just $1.83 per month and 3 months extra, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get many benefits of Atlas VPN for the ridiculously low price. You can take this deal by clicking the link in the description below. Be quick, as it's a limited time offer. The earliest historical examples we have recorded in the British Isles concern medieval stories. One of them is a medieval Scottish story of Oran of Iona, which also has some overlap with Irish folklore. So Oran of Iona was the brother or the son or the companion of Saint Columba, who lived in the 6th century. And it's said he was the first Christian buried at the Pagan Viking burial ground on the island of Iona. One version of his myth, which is very popular in Scotland, concerns the monastic church on Iona. Apparently couldn't be built because it kept collapsing, and a voice told Saint Columba that a human sacrifice was required. And so Oran, his son or whatever, brother or whatever he is, volunteered to be buried alive in a pit beneath the foundations of the house. And in other versions of the story, the chapel could not be built because of an evil spirit until a human was sacrificed and buried under the foundation, whether Oran or someone else. And after that, the chapel stood firm. So you can see some clear parallels with the modern custom of burying a horse under that foundation, and of course the ancient Bronze Age and Iron Age Celtic practices of doing the same thing. Romanians have a very similar story to this medieval Scottish story. It's a Romanian folk story concerning someone called the master builder Manole. Sorry if I mispronounced the Romanian name. Or Manole was the chief architect of the Curtea de Arges monastery in Wallachia, however you pronounce that. That's in Romania. So according to the legend, Manole has a dream that they must sacrifice the next person who visits the building site, or the building will not stand. The monastery will collapse as soon as it's built. So the next morning, the first visitor is, much to Manole's dismay, his own beautiful young wife. And he tries to pray to God to say, don't let her come, send winds and rains to stop her coming, which God does. But the determined and dedicated young wife comes anyway to the building site, wanting to bring sandwiches and food for her husband. And when she gets there, of course, Manole has to honor his promise, and he has his own wife buried alive in the walls of the monastery, or the foundations of the monastery. It's a very sad story. It's probably not true, so that's good. But it does reflect a real belief of the sacrifice of a human or an animal being essential for maintaining the integrity of the structure of a new building. Going further back into the Bronze Age, now I said that this Northern European custom begins in Bronze Age examples, but it wasn't limited to Bronze Age Europe, because high caste Indians and Iranians today descend from a late Bronze Age people who lived in Central Asia that are known as the Aryans. And they had their origin in early Bronze Age Northern Europe, the corded ware culture. And they migrated from northeastern Europe into the Central Asian steppe, where they are identified first with the Sintashtar culture of the South Urals and later with the Andronovo culture of Central Asia. And it's these people who migrated later into India and Iran and brought the languages and cultures associated with the so-called Indo-Aryan languages of India and the Iranic languages of the steppe and of Iran. One custom we can see archaeologically did exist among Sintashtar and Andronovo is this burying under the foundations. Here's a quote on the matter from the archaeologist Kuzmina in her book Origins of the Indo-Iranians. There are also examples of human sacrifice, often of small children buried under the floor or in a special annex, that are known from the Andronovo culture. This rite can be explained in terms of the early Indians' belief that the universe was comprised of the parts of the body of the first man, Purusha. The whole house is then a microcosm, a model of the universe in miniature. It means that the construction of a house requires the same type of sacrifice. The Vedic Aryans in India rejected this bloody rite. They simply drew a Purusha on the place of the future house. But the rite of ritual killing was preserved for the construction of temples and royal palaces in some parts of South Asia up to the 20th century. So I suppose it did then exist in parts of India. But as for Sintashtar, it says here were numerous ritual burials of children, dog, cattle, sheep, and goat, especially kids, meaning young goats, not human children, but they did have human children, as sacrifices. Vessels are found in defensive ditches. Traces of massive fires and destruction, apparently caused by warfare and demanding the rebuilding of the settlement, have been found on many sites. So what that shows is that there's a continuity of the culture of the late Bronze Age Indo-Europeans in Central Asia with their early Bronze Age ancestors in Europe. And it's from those early Bronze Age Indo-Europeans that this custom, whether it's found in Asia or in Europe, always derives. And by the way, the Andronovo live about 4,000 years ago, whereas their ancestors in the corded ware culture, we're talking 5,000 years ago or more. So that's a really old custom to survive so well in so many different countries, India, Romania, Scotland, Ireland. But there's more. I'm going to tell you about some more examples now. Ireland has one of the richest traditions of burying animals under the house foundations that survives to the modern day. All throughout old homes in Ireland, horses' heads with copper coins are found buried under the hearth. Old folks claimed it was for acoustics and song and dance, but there's another explanation that it was for luck and protection. So this practice only started fading out in the early 20th century. It's not common now. It's not common for builders in Ireland to do this anymore, but it's very common when you're renovating a house to find evidence that it was done, because it was done for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, up until the early 20th century. And of course, the Irish brought this custom to America too. The British and the Irish both brought this custom to America, so you can find examples in America. And also in Australia, by the way, especially the cats I mentioned earlier, the British brought that custom to some Australian houses. So you occasionally find a petrified cat preserved in the walls of an Australian house. But in Ireland, it seems to be a way to consecrate one's home, and other animals can sometimes be used in Ireland, including hares, which is also a sort of magical animal in Celtic folklore. Sean McMathgama of County Clare stated, "I used to hear the old people say that it was put there for the purpose of giving a fine, hearty echo to a house when people would be talking or walking inside the house. But particularly, they put their head, with the coppers, in the floor so that their dancing would sound better for the old people who were all for sport." That's an interesting idea. It corresponds to what's in Britain with the acoustic theory. It was popular among folklorists in Ireland, but I can't possibly explain all of it, especially the ancient examples. But yeah, the Irish put coins inside the skull to make the acoustics even more, there's a sound box beneath the floor, basically, of a skull with a cavity inside with coins. It's possible that would increase the acoustics, but I'm not really sure. I have enough trouble trying to get the acoustics right in this room. Perhaps I need to get some horse skulls in here. The retired keeper of Irish antiquities at the National Museum of Ireland, Eamon Kelly, wrote in Archaeology Island that horses have been credited with the ability to see ghosts and other evil spirits, and this may account for the practice of placing a horse skull or skulls beneath a flagstone next to the hearth. In Scandinavia, there are also many customs associated like this, so it certainly is not limited to Celtic countries. Burying the skulls of horses and cattle under houses and barns is attested from at least the late 1100s in historical sources. Putting a horse skull in the bonfire on St. John's Eve, which is basically midsummer, the midsummer celebration, supposedly prevented witches from flying over the bonfire. They had to walk into it instead, or they'd be killed. So the association there of horses as a ward against witches, as we've seen in Britain, is also present in Scandinavia. There are Viking Age examples of this practice too. A pig's head was deposited beneath one of the gates at Agersborg. In Scandinavia, some folklorists have also recorded an explanation among people for why they do this as the acoustic explanation, that they used to put them under the threshing floors in order to improve the echo and let the sound of solid threshing be heard by the neighbors. Don't really know why threshing is necessary for threshing to be heard by your neighbors, but that must be some Scandinavian custom where that was considered important. But the widespread explanation of threshing in so many different locales from Scandinavia to Ireland probably means that it does have an ancient provenance. But yeah, I'm not convinced that it's always the reason, because there's always this sort of ward against evil explanation, which is very old too. Scandinavians also used to use these kind of animals to influence the weather. There's an example of using animals that have been struck by lightning to protect a house from lightning. In Nore Farup, a little north of Ribe, a modern family moved into an older farm, which they took over in 2003. And while, going over the house, they discovered the dried remains of a calf in the attic, which you'll see a picture of it on screen now. The former owners of the house said that the calf was once struck by lightning out in the field, and because it was believed that lightning could not strike in the same place twice, they moved the dead calf up into the attic so that future lightning strikes would never hurt the house. I love that. It's basically like a focused version of troll physics. Lightning can't strike twice in one place. Put a lightning struck cow in the attic. Problem? It's not known how long the calf had been lying there. It could have been hundreds of years. But they left it there because they didn't see any reason to move it. In Scandinavia, the horse's head is said to be a symbol of power, and the horse in general has symbolized power and vitality. And it's also been a symbol of the sun. Now, I've talked about this in two different videos, the ancient solar significance of the horse and the chariot. One is my video on the Kivik tomb of Bronze Age Sweden, which you can see a lot about horses, the significance of the horse carvings there. But also I've got an entire video about horse sacrifices across Europe and ancient times and modern, and that has a large section on Scandinavian customs involving horse fighting and horse sacrifices. So the very, very important role of the horse in Germanic pagan religion, Nordic pagan religion, is well attested. Even the Romans made note of the fact that the Germanic people were using horses for telling the future, and they were used in divination basically, and the ritual customs associated with horses for ensuring fertility survived into the modern era and were common in different parts of Norway and Sweden until very recently. This aspect may have something to do with the magical properties of horse skulls when used in building deposits as well. The magic power of a horse's skull is so widely known, and it brings luck and also expels evil. So yeah, I'm not happy when people try and say that the horse skull must be there for acoustic reasons every time, because there's so many magical explanations that are also used in different contexts. In the Iron Age, Germanic people such as Scandinavians used to sacrifice horses to bogs and wetland areas. And the bog, or all watery places, are liminal spaces between one world, our world, and the next world. And so it could be seen that the transfer of the horse sacrifice deposit from a bog into the foundations of a house is because the house particularly the doorway, and as I said, they're often found under the doorways. The house and the doorway can also be a liminal space, particularly doorways. You transition from one place to the next. It was actually common to bury horses under the foundations in southern Scandinavia until recent times, just as it was in Britain. Whereas the specifically acoustic example of horse skull depositions in Scandinavia seems to be more associated with churches. You'll find them under the churches. It's also with threshing barns, as I mentioned previously. So I think a good way to tell the difference between the magical function and the acoustic function is if it's in a communal building like a church, or if there's many skulls, then it's acoustic. But if there's just one animal and it's in a private home, it's probably a magical horse deposition intended to protect the house. Very similar customs as you find in Scandinavia are also found in Finland, which some people even call Scandinavia, but it's not technically Scandinavia. It's separate to that peninsula. But in Finland, there's some difference in practices. So they often deposit the rib bones with the horse skull. And in one example from eastern Finland, it specifies the folk custom requires that the lady of the house has to secretly conceal a horse skull under the floor of a new building, which is unique to Finland as far as I'm aware. Deposited horse skulls and even whole skeletons of horses are sometimes found in the hearth constructs of old houses until recently in the geographical area now known as Ostrobothnia, which is actually mostly a Swedish part of Finland. It was occupied a lot by Swedes. So you might assume, therefore, that this custom was brought to Finland by Swedes, except that there are also lots of examples further east in Finland as well. In Ostrobothnia, you've got an entire horse was found under a house in the 1950s. But you can see, even as far away as Helsinki, there are also examples. So I don't think it's just Swedes doing it. The Finns also have a unique local variant called the Alder-Horse. And in this case, they make a horse out of the wood from the alder tree. And then they have to paint eyes on it with the blood of a woman who's recently given birth. And then it becomes a magical kind of a horse, which they can use to bless or curse horses, depending on how it's buried in the stable. So if you bury it upside down in the stable, it can curse the horses. I think if you bury it the right way up, then it can bless the horses. So that's uniquely Finnish. And it does seem very similar to the other customs. So I think it's derived from the same original tradition. So just to recap, if you live in Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia, or America, there's a good chance that there is a horse sacrifice underneath your home. Now, the people who are doing this in the early 20th century, in 1920 or whatever, didn't know that they were doing something pagan. They probably didn't have any idea. And I mean, the fact that it goes all the way back to the Bronze Age is only recently being realized. This is an Indo-European custom that has survived for 5,000 years up until recently. It has now died out, but I don't see why it has to stay died out. I tried to get the builder, when this office was being built in 2021, I tried to get the builder to let me put a skull under or something, but he wasn't too keen on it. And anyway, the local farmer didn't have any spare horse heads or cow heads that we could use. But maybe the acoustics would have been better. If not, if you don't like the acoustics of this video, I do apologize, but you can blame the builder and the farmer for not giving me a horse skull. This has been Survive the Jive. I hope you found this edifying and interesting, and that you'll consider subscribing and following this channel for more information about folklore and ancient history and pagan customs that survive into the present day. There are so many, actually, examples like this. One video I highly recommend, if you enjoyed this one, is called Holy Holes. And I document the widespread practice of using holes in trees and holes in stones for various magical practices that survives even today in various parts of Britain and Scandinavia, but that clearly has an ancient origin, probably going all the way back to the Indo-Europeans, because similar practices are found in India as well. I just find that absolutely astounding. That's such the perseverance of these enduring customs that not only survive Christianity, but also survive industrialization and the modern world. It's only with the 20th century that they start to die out. And isn't that terrible? That's more the more reason for us to bring them back. So yeah, if you want to know more, subscribe, watch some of my other videos, consider becoming a patron, because if you are a patron, you'll get access to really special content, and you'll get to talk to me personally if you're a high tier patron in my voice chats that I do on Telegram. Thanks a lot for watching. This has been Survive the Jive.